Good morning, everybody. Listen, with each grain is a step closer to success, and our time is golden, just like these sands. So let's dive into today's treasure. I'm super pumped to be with all my pivot lifers this morning. And today I'm going to answer the question that so many people ask. Why is it that most of God's people aren't truly successful? Why are they stuck living paycheck to paycheck? Why do they mostly die without fulfilling the dreams that they have for their lives? And I'm not saying that everyone lives like this, and I'm not saying that everyone is this person, but what I'm saying is that we often see that there are more people who are unsaved, unbelievers, that are successful than those who are saved, who are believers, who worship God, that should be successful. And today, I'm going to pull back the curtain to share with you and show you exactly why more unbelievers are successful than those who are. And it starts with this basic question, and I want to ask all of you this question today. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? This is a loaded question, but it's a serious question. Who are you? And many of you may try to debate with me that you know who you are, and I get it. All of us do. Today, I'm going to push you to study yourself. Most of us on here really don't know who we are. That's right. I said it. You don't really know who you are. And let's be honest, we all believe that we know who we are, including myself. For years, I thought I knew who I was. And just like you, I didn't know who I was. So before I throw you the touchdown pass, I really have to give you the play so that we can literally learn how to study ourselves. This week is all about studying yourself, learning yourself, discovering yourself, figuring out who you are. And what you'll realize in this quest and in this search, you'll realize that as you discover more about who you are, you'll discover that your success lies in discovering who you are first. Because if I tell you the truth, the real reason you are not successful is not because you're a believer. It's not because your education. It's not because you didn't grow up in a two-parent household. It's not because you are poor, or it really comes down and starts with knowing who you are. It's that simple. And I know some of you might be watching me right now saying it can't be that simple. Well, I'm telling you, it's that simple, because if we eliminated education, if we eliminated financials and resources and all that kind of stuff, there are people who are killing in the success game. And they didn't come from money, and they didn't come from education. Most of them dropped out from college. So it really comes down to knowing who you are. And when I say know who you are, I'm not talking about your name or your niche or the industry that you're in. It's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. Drop that in the chat for me real quick and says it's bigger than that. It's not about my name. It's not about my niche, because I know there's a lot of people out here on YouTube and on Instagram and on TikTok telling you, go after the niche that is big, that has a big area, big influence. No, that's not who you are. It's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. Most success from a biblical perspective starts with the characters understanding who they are. If you study from Genesis to Revelation, you'll realize that every character that was successful, it wind up coming down to them discovering and knowing who they are. Now, there are other barriers to success that we must break down and must be broken. And we'll deal with that later on today. But the first thing that we have to attack is the idea of knowing who you are, knowing yourself. Many of us know we know everybody else around. We know our best friends, we know our spouses, we know our significant others, we know what they like, their favorite colors, what they love to eat, we know what they like to wear, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to us, we really don't know who we are. And I know some of you are going back and forth with me saying, I know who I am, I know who I am, I know who I am. It's okay. By the time we get done with today, I promise you, you will discover who you really are, okay? Because in the Bible, each believer, before they reached their true level of success, didn't know who they were. If you study characters, you'll see that every last character, before they reached that level of success, they did not really know who they were. They identified with their name, but they didn't know who they were. There is a difference between identifying with your name and identifying with who you are. My mentor makes this statement all the time, and I love it. And he says this. He says, I didn't know I was me. And it blew my mind because everyone else saw him and knew who he was based on what he was doing, but he didn't know he was him. And it is a mind-blowing experience to discover and have an aha moment to really realize who you are. And if you want to be successful, you first have to discover who you are. And I want you to check this principle. In the Bible, Adam is successful because he knows he's a man and God placed him in the garden to work and to tend it. And he also knows what he's not supposed to eat or what tree he's not supposed to eat from. Check this out. Here's the next part. Abram thinks that he's just the son of Terah till he discovers that he's Abraham and he will be a father of many nations. I want you to start seeing this trend. Saul thinks that his entire purpose in being is to be a persecutor. He thinks that's his life until he discovers who he truly is and that it is to be an apostle and to take him to full success when he discovers that part of him. Now, this is one of my favorite characters, David. David is faithful, tending sheep till he is called in the house to discover who he is. And up until this point, hear me, everybody in Pivot Life, drop it in the chat. You got to learn who you are. Up until this point, he thinks he's just a shepherd to sheep. He thinks he's just a skillful musician, but he discovers in the house that he's really a king. What if I told you the reason you haven't experienced your full level of success is because you haven't spent enough time discovering who you are? You haven't spent enough time discovering yourself, discovering what it is inside of you, the purpose, the abilities, the talent, the skill, the dreams, the vision, the destiny. I'm Marquise Gold, but I'm not. Bob Proctor teaches us that we are not our first and last name. These are two words that were given to us by other individuals, by someone else. And these names that were given to us do not truly authentically define who you are. Because if you really study these principles, you'll realize that in the scripture, every time they discovered who they were, God changed their name. Isn't that phenomenal that they were named by someone else, but when they discovered who they were, not just in the earth, but with God, God changed their name. So we say this is me, but that's not me. This is not me. You're more than just the body, the name, the first and last name. It's more than that. When we say that something on our body is sick, we don't say body sick. We say my hand, my foot, my stomach, because they have significance just like you. So my question is, who are you? And I see y'all going wild over here in the chat. Who are you? 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 And I want you to write this down because we're going to dive deep into this and realize, and it's my purpose and goal today, that by the time we finish this session, you will be that believer who's on their way to success. And I'm not talking about just any level of success. I'm talking about success that's not defined by what other people think you should be doing, what they think you're good at, what they think you're called to. No, I'm talking about success from the perspective of you have fully discovered and realized that if no one else believes in what you're called to, and no one else believes that that is success, that you fall in love with that level of success in your own life, all right? And so I want you to write these three things down. We live in three spheres of life and understanding. There are three spheres of life and understanding. Number one, we are spiritual creatures created by God. Put that in the chat. We are spiritual creatures created by God. That is the first thing. Number two, we have an intellect. We have an intellect. This is a sphere of life and understanding. We have an intellect. That's number two. Put that in the chat. Number three, we live in physical bodies in this world. So number one, we are spiritual creatures created by God. Number two, we have an intellect. And number three, we live in physical bodies in this world. But because we lack awareness and understanding of who we are, that leads us to be locked into a physical world. So most of us don't realize this, that literally we were supposed to be spiritual beings living in the spiritual world, but now we are spiritual beings caught and locked into a physical world and don't understand what's happening. We lose who we are because we're locked into this physical world when we're supposed to be spiritual beings, okay? And so this leads me to this thought. That means that we allow things outside of us to control us. 95% of the world is reacting to life. We're not enjoying life. We're not living life. We are reacting to life. 95% of everything we do, from Monday to Sunday, we are reacting to life. We are not really living. We are not really enjoying it. We are not really having the time or having life more abundantly because of the establishment, and I'm gonna hit you really hard right here, of social media platforms. This locked us into this physical world because most of us don't understand life outside of the digital world. We use social media to escape our physical life. And so we're locked into this physical world. It has become worse because now we are not only controlled by the people in our environment and in arm's length around us, but now we are controlled and influenced by a complete stranger we see online. And now we want to be like them and have their life, not even knowing if their life is real, because we're enamored by this social world, which has another layer of the physical world attached to it, that now we're influenced by people who are complete strangers, no validity, don't know whether or not what we see is real, but we want it because it's put in front of us. And I told you that the first sphere that we live in is spiritual. We are spiritual beings created by God. So the space we're supposed to be this space is supposed to be our main space of direction, clarity, inspiration, support. And God created us as spiritual beings first. Everything else around us in nature was to reveal to us more and more who we are. Now, I want you to pause right there and think about that. Everything else in nature was supposed to point us towards who we are and what we're called to. But we've been locked into this physical space. Check this out. Adam found who he was first from God, then by doing work, tilling the ground. He was so busy doing what he was created to do that he didn't even know, and he didn't even have time to even question if he was missing something in life. Adam had no need to compare himself to anyone else because he knew who he was. Think about this. Most of us live life comparing ourselves because we haven't been consumed long enough with the thing God has called us to. So as soon as we put our hand towards something, we get thrown off by comparing our life to someone else's life, our success to someone else's success. And this is where we go down this rabbit hole. Most unbelievers are unsuccessful because they are convinced. They are not convinced that they know who they are. Most unbelievers are successful because they are convinced that they know who they are, even if who they are is wrong. And they are not trying to become, copy, or even compare themselves to anybody else. That's why most unbelievers are successful versus God's people being unsuccessful, because we walk around tiptoeing, trying to make sure that we don't offend people, that we don't step on people's toes, that we don't ruffle feathers, that we're nice and that we're holy and that we're this, when everything about Christ was literally the opposite. He turned over tables. He caused issues. He said, I came not to bring peace, but to bring the sword, to turn fathers against children. Like literally, we want to do the opposite when unbelievers really don't even care. I don't want to say names, but if you look at someone like an Elon Musk, he is doing things no one else was doing, and he is loud about it. He's not trying to change, but he finds maximum sex because he discovered in one spear, who he is. Imagine if he discovered God and found out who he was in all spheres, spiritually, physically, in every area of his life. Imagine the impact he could have. And here we are knowing who he is, who God is, and yet we still tiptoe around and never accomplish success. Let me try to break this down because I'm running out of time, but let me try to break this down for you. In Genesis, God said, let us make man in our image. We understand that. That's the simplest scripture in the Bible, in the beginning. Now, image here does not mean copy and paste. Copy and paste. When he said, let us make man in our image, he's not saying let's copy and paste ourselves. Image is not the same as duplicate. So many of us have to understand that he's not duplicating himself. He's making not a copy of himself, not a paste of himself. So many of us are trying to duplicate someone else's success. We want to do it like them. We want to do it like them. We want to have the same exact followers and comments and likes and attributes as someone else. Or we want to have their lifestyle or their brand. This is the first clue that you don't know who you are. The first clue that you don't know who you are is that you're trying to, quote unquote, copy and paste someone else's success. You're trying to do it like them. You're trying to rock it like them. You're trying to copy like them. It's good to be inspired, but you're called to be different. You're not called to copy and paste, right? And so that's the first clue that you don't know who you are. So if you say you know who you are, but yet you're still trying to copy someone else, then you have not discovered who you are. But what God was saying in the beginning is let us cut out or carve out something like us. Now, it's not going to be exactly us, but it's going to refer to a pattern or a form, okay? So it is not the actual thing, but bears a resemblance. There's a resemblance there. So the Hebrew word here for image is derived from a root word meaning a shadow. So when he said, let us make him in our image, he was really saying, let's make man from the outline of us or the shadow of us or the shape of us. All of us have a shadow of us, but the shadow is just a resemblance of us, but it doesn't always look just like us because it's missing some important parts. So shadows are outlines. It misses some important parts and details, but you can make out that it's your shadow. It's your form. You can make it out. Today, I'm going to give you your outline to help you find your shadow, to discover who you are so that you can pivot into your next, so that you can be that person who loves God, believes God, trusts God, and have success. I want you to be like Adam and know who you are and be so engulfed in your assignment that God literally has to tell you what you were missing. I ain't talking about your friends. I ain't talking about social media. I'm talking about you're so engulfed in your work, so engulfed in your purpose, so engulfed in your assignment that God literally has to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you're missing this. Not you opening up Instagram and seeing someone else doing something and then you start feeling inadequate and you start feeling like you're missing something or you start feeling like you could be doing that. No, God would literally have to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you're missing this. That God will visit you in the middle of your good life and say it's not good. Like, how crazy is that? That you will be so consumed in your assignment and your purpose that God is the only person who will literally be able to tap you on your shoulder and tell you, even though this is good to you, it's not good because I got more for you. I believe some of you were brought here because he already started talking to you, and others he's getting ready to talk to you even more. So this is the first sphere that we live in when it comes to the spiritual sphere. Everything is spiritual, even when you don't think it is. And so the first sphere is literally becoming so engulfed in knowing who you are, your assignment, your purpose, not comparing success to someone else's level of success. Because what is successful to you may not be successful to them. And what is successful to them may not be successful to you. Success is not predicated on material things or things that you acquire or what other people says is success. Success really boils down to this thing: fulfillment of purpose. So let's go to the second sphere. Let's go to the second sphere. Now, this is a deep sphere because this sphere is the intellect sphere. We all have an intellect. This is the intellect sphere, all right? Now, this is the space that more aspire to be at. But today, I want to show you how this sphere should not be played with, nor should it be undermined, because if you tap into this sphere inappropriately, you can mess up your life. You can get stuck in this place of not being successful, because this is the place of knowledge. This is where we start to learn, when we start to really garner more information. When we start to learn, we really are not learning. We think we're learning. And many people say that, like, people think that we're learning. We think we're learning because we discover something that we did not know, and now we know. So we think that we're more intellectual, or that we know this information now because we did not know it. But that is not always learning, because sometimes what's so powerful is that people want to debate me about intellect and learning and information and knowledge. But before you debate me, let me finish this powerful point. We believe that learning is getting new information, but that is only one part of learning. Learning is not just about getting information. Many people believe that they are intellectual because they know big words or because they found out some new information. That does not make you intellectual. What if I told you that we have not been learning, but rather we have been mimicking? We've been mimicking what we've seen, what we heard someone else say, and really have not learned truth for ourselves. The reason I say this is because learning is not just about the process of acquiring new information, new knowledge, new skills, new attitudes or abilities through experiences or study or instruction, but learning involves also the ability to apply. So if I learn something new, not having experienced the application of it, then I have not learned anything. I have discovered something without practicing it. A person who is intellectual has discovered new information, has applied that information, has tried that information, and has seen success with that information. This then gives them the ability to teach on that information because they have applied the information, okay? So learning involves the ability to apply and adapt that knowledge to your situation and capable of handling the consequences that come with that information. You can have great information, but if you can't handle the consequence of the information, then you haven't learned anything. It's the ability to not only learn and to apply, but also to adapt and to be able and capable of handling the consequence that comes with that information. So why does more unbelievers become more successful? Because not only are they learning information, they're behind the scene before they even post. Like, this is the craziest thing we do. We're working on something new. We are so excited about it. We got to put a story up. We got to post and be like, oh, working on something, making a big deal, getting ready to start this, like, stay tuned, blah, blah, blah. Like, this cannot be a season where you're prematurely posting stuff, trying to impress people that you are successful. Most unbelievers, before they even post it, they've already worked on it, learned it, tried it, adapted, and probably getting ready to release the 5th version of it before you've ever even heard about it. ChatGPT was only heard of a year ago, but it was in the making for the last 7, 8 years. And nobody was pre-posting about it because unbelievers are not trying to impress people. They're so engulfed in their gift or in their assignment that they don't care who knows what they're working on until it's ready to be released. And so this is why I say most only mimic. We never truly learn. This is where barriers to success come from, okay? They are all birthed in the intellectual sphere. They're all birthed in the intellectual sphere. The more we think we are learning, the more intellectual we believe we are. So you end up doing things that you should not be doing because you haven't applied it, okay? So you have to learn how to begin to apply and adapt and be able to handle the consequences that comes along with this, okay? So most only mimic, we never really learning. These barriers to success are all birthed in this sphere of the intellectual sphere, okay? The more we think we are learning, the more intellectual we believe we are. And the more intellectual we believe we are, the harder it is for us to become successful because we believe success starts to unfold in the intellectual space when that is not the case, okay? I'm gonna say that again. The more intellectual we believe we are, the harder it is for us to become successful because what we believe success is starts to unfold in the intellectual space. Hold tight because this is how we go deeper. Now, I want to say this as we're in this sphere, okay? Now, don't miss this because in this sphere of the intellectual sphere, I want to say this. Adam lived in this spiritual sphere. When Eve was cut out from Adam, she became his shadow, his outline. Now, she lives in the spiritual sphere, but also the intellectual sphere. And here's how. Adam has learned about everything around him because he has had time there. Put that in the chat. He's had time there. He has had time there. He has had time there, okay? So Adam is living in this spiritual sphere. Eve comes on. She's a cop. She's a shadow of him. She's living in the intellectual sphere, and but she's also in the spiritual sphere. But she's living in the intellectual sphere more so because Adam has had time and everything that Eve is questioning, right? So this gives him an advantage because even though he knows this information, it's still all spiritual to him. He doesn't even know it's intellectual. Have you ever met somebody that was really, 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 really successful and you have a conversation with them and they don't even really have a total understanding of what they've accomplished or what they've done? And this is like Adam. Adam is that guy. He has accomplished so much that he doesn't even know he's successful. And then not only that, he doesn't even know that what he's been doing is intellectual, because here's a man who has no experience in taking care of a garden and he's killing it. Here's a man who has no experience in naming animals and he's killing it. Here's a man who has no experience in doing any of the things he's been assigned to do, and he's killing it. And he doesn't even know his intellectual. And the reason why he doesn't know his intellectual is because he's living in a spiritual sphere. He's not living in an intellectual sphere. So everything that he's doing it based on the assignment. So Adam is successful not because of what he knows, but for what he doesn't know. Some of us, yikes, I gotta say it one more time. Adam is not successful because of what he knows. He is successful because of what he doesn't know. Some of us, we are the blockage to our success because we know too much. We have too many praises. We have too many people patting us on the back. We have too many people pumping us up. You know too much. So you don't even understand that the level of success that you're experiencing is just a surface and you could never get to the next level because you know too much. Adam is successful because of what he doesn't know. He doesn't even know naming animals is powerful because he's just doing it in a spiritual sphere. He doesn't even know tending to the garden and tilling the garden is amazing work because he's not in the intellectual sphere. He's in a spiritual sphere. So he has no experience in naming things, but he succeeds at it. He has no experience tending to anything, but he succeeds at it. This is a principle that you'll see in the scripture. So let me go deeper. David spends most of his time in the field taking care of sheep. He has no experience at it, but he's succeeding at it. He's a good shepherd. To him, success to him is being in the house like his brothers with his dad, but he can't experience that. So he's looking at that as success and don't even realize that in the spiritual sphere he is in the field is even more successful because he's killing something that he has no experience at. But while in the field, he starts to acquire a talent and becomes a skillful musician. Now you would think in order to become good, you have to take a class. Someone has to train you, etc. But imagine this dude in the field, being a shepherd, taking care of sheep, and picking up a skill along the way. This guy becomes good at something in the worst season of his life. Most believers block their way to success because they're waiting for God to show up and do something for them instead of learning something in the worst season of your life. David learns a skill, a talent in the worst season of his life. While he's feeling rejected, while he's feeling like he's out there by himself, while he's tending to animals, talking to animals, he's learning how to play an instrument. And nobody's teaching him. Nobody's out there giving him classes. He's learning it on his own because he's not just in a spiritual sphere, he's not in an intellectual sphere. And not only is he learning, but he's applying it and adapting and handling the consequence that comes with that. Like, yo, I hope y'all getting this today. Eve is new to this space. So she's spiritual and she is aware, but her inquisitiveness takes her into this intellectual sphere where unknown barriers to her success starts to appear. Now, check this. And I want you to write this down. Somebody drop this in the chat for me, guys. Like, yo, the barriers of success is for everyone. Okay. So all of us, whether you're saved or unsaved, we all face the same barriers of success. And I'm going to give it to you real quick so that when you leave this live today, you can go out of here and you can find true success in whatever it is that you feel your assignment is. Okay. So here is the barrier to success that many of us are facing and we don't even know it. Number one, the number one barrier to success is our conditioning. Check me. This takes place in your subconscious mind and starts to develop when we are infants, okay? So now I need you to see this. Eve, even though she is created in her adult form, she is still an infant in respect to her time on earth. So infants only have the ability to act and to mimic the people around them. This is why when we are growing up and we're younger, we can learn the language that we learn because we hear it around us. So if you grew up hearing English, you mimic that, you learn it based on mimicking and acting. If you grew up with 5 languages in your household, then you will learn all 5 languages with no barrier and no problem. Why? Because you're only mimicking and acting. And the more you mimic and act, the more you begin to adapt and the more you begin to you begin to adhere. So you can learn 5 languages as a child because of what's around you, your conditioning. But the older you become, the more you become conditioned that it's harder to cross that barrier to learn more languages because you're so conditioned that you've only learned one and that's all you'll be able to learn. So the older we become, the more we say we couldn't learn another language, but you could if you wanted to. So we have this conditioning and that this is the barrier that is inside of us, okay? So we mimic what we see and we mimic what we hear, okay? Most unbelievers are successful because they don't live under some of the conditioning that are placed into God's people's mind. Like the idea that money is evil. As long as I have King Jesus, I don't need nothing else. Or humbleness before the Lord, or being a broke servant. That is better to give than it is to receive. Give everything away and have nothing. Like these are all conditioning mechanisms that we live under. But unbelievers don't live under that. And this is why they see success, because God never was supposed to have, he never intended for these conditions to be put in our mind. He said, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So the conditioning mindset stops many believers from reaching success. Okay. Think about this. Think about this, y'all. David discovers that he is anointed to be king when he goes into the house, right? But then he's sent back into the field to tend sheep. He could have started to think it will never happen, that they lied to him, that this was all a scam, that they were capping, that this will never come to pass. He could have just settled with that and sat in the field and never allowed any, and just missed a moment. Or he could give up and just say, you know what? Whatever they said, it's just not going to happen, because most of the time we think when we get a word, it's supposed to happen immediately, and that doesn't happen that way. But instead, he conditioned himself to develop himself even after he may have felt disappointed. It wasn't who he was that got him to the palace. It wasn't even the oil poured on David's head that got him to the palace. It was the talent he worked on in the field, playing the harp in his worst season. What if I told you your next level of success as a believer is not going to come from the prophetic words you had over your life? It's going to come from the talent or the gift that you picked up in your worst season, the abilities that you learned when nobody wanted to mentor you, when nobody wanted to walk with you, when nobody wanted to be your friend, when nobody wanted to support you, when nobody wanted to help you. Like, what if that's going to be the thing that's going to open up the next door for you, but you sitting there waiting on God because you got a prophetic word over your life? No, what are you working on? What are you developing yourself in? No matter how hard your season is, what are you trying to find in the field that will make you better until your season of better shows up? Because that little thing that David spent time learning to play in the field got him to the palace, not the prophetic word, not the oil. When King David had an evil spirit in him, someone said, I know a man. Not a man that's anointed, but a man who is a skillful musician. Yo, like, I don't think y'all getting this joint, bro. Like, yo, the point I'm trying to make is this, that most Unbelievers don't wait for the one thing to happen. They are conditioned in their mind to develop themselves and work on something that just might lead them to the next door. And there are so many people who become successful after they have failed at other things, but they kept working on something that led them to the next door. And the thing that you work on is the thing that you have to work on, something that leads to the next door. Instead of just sitting there doing nothing, waiting on God, work on something. Work on something that could lead you to the next door. So he gets to the palace because he has a gift and an ability to play a harp. And that gift gets him in the door. And then he goes down this, okay, this is the second barrier, okay? So the second barrier, write this down, y'all. The second barrier, I'm way out of time. The second barrier is our environment. So the first barrier we understand is conditioning. It's conditioning the mind. The second barrier is environment. We have a tendency to act like everybody around us. And if you think about this, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because 95% of the people live their entire life and die never living the way they want to live. Because most people will work 40 years of their lives, turn 65 years old, and then end up with hardly any money for retirement. And so your environment plays a big part. It plays a big part. And this becomes a big barrier for most people. I see y'all going crazy in the comments, but I can't even answer the questions right now because I'm like in a flow right here, bro. Because this environment barrier plays a big part. And this is a biblical principle, y'all. Check me out. Your environment can grow you or it can shrink you. It can make you better or it can make you worse. It can put you on the track to success or the track towards failure. Your environment is a barrier. It is a barrier. Unbelievers are more successful because they get into the right environments. Too many believers are in the wrong environments. You think just because you're in church, you're in the right environment. That is not true. That is not true. That is not true. That is not true. You need to be more time in the spirit, more time in the spiritual realm of God, because that's in the realm, in the spirit is where the realm that God begins to show you things and begin to reveal things to you. So just because you're in a building doesn't mean you're in the right environment. God places Adam in an environment called the Garden of Eden, okay? And that environment grew him. God placed David in an environment that he didn't understand at first because it felt like rejection when it really was protection. And then God put David in another environment that felt like more rejection, but David learned how not to mimic the behavior that Saul had towards him. He didn't mimic it back. So Saul threw spears, David didn't throw stuff back. So you have to learn that every environment can either grow you or it can shrink you. It can mature you or it can develop you. It can grow you up or it can make you immature. You have to learn how to get into the right environment because this is a barrier. So let me first define what success is. Because moving forward, you have to understand that if I'm going to overcome these barriers, the barrier of conditioning and the barrier of environment, I have to understand what success is, because a person is successful if they know where they are going and what they are trying to accomplish. And you progressively move in that direction. That is what real success is. Success is no longer about money, cars, houses, likes, follows. I once thought, and I want to share this with you. I once thought, guys, and hear me, I got a lot of material things, but I once thought that success was locked up in all of the things that I have accomplished. And at the age of 16, I started a journey to become successful. And by the age of 25, I had millions and I had a real estate portfolio and I had a Range Rover and Benz and Bentleys and Rolls Royces and a thriving church and multiple businesses. I was managing some of the biggest artists in the gospel arena and I lived in a gated house. And guess what I discovered at 31 years old? I wasn't successful. With all of that, I didn't know who I was and where I wanted to be, or where I wanted to go, or who I was going to become. So the Lord had to have a conversation with me, and he like tapped me on my shoulder and he was like, yeah, all this is not good. And at 33, I had to discover what success was by letting God put me to sleep all over again. and to show me all these external things that I thought equated to success. And it was there that I discovered where I was and who I was and where I wanted to go, and started to progressively move towards that direction, which leads me to the third spear, guys. And the third spear is the physical body. This is the world that we live in. This spear gives us a level of restrictions, but the way to master this spear is to do what you can based on your physical body. And the body is something that varies from person to person. So based on the world you live in is based on the different types of restrictions you have. And so anyone in here that has a goal and you are moving towards it, you are successful. I want you to drop that down in the chat, guys. If you have a goal and you're actively moving towards it, you are successful. Like literally, I really want you to understand that you are successful. If you are actively moving towards it, you are successful. Drop that in the chat. If you aren't doing anything in this sphere but making excuses or complaining or feeling stuck or believing that, this is just the life you've been dealt or the cards you've been dealt, and this is the life you have to live, then you have to change this conditioning in your mind. That's a barrier for you. Look at Adam and Eve. They finally discover their physical sphere and they become afraid. When they finally discover this physical sphere, they become afraid and they cover themselves and they hide. So when you discover who you are, when you learn all three spheres, you learn your spiritual sphere, and then you learn the intellectual sphere, and then you understand the physical sphere. And when you realize that, and you start understanding the barriers towards success, and you start eliminating those things, then you realize that no longer can you allow yourself to live beneath who God has called you to be. As a believer and as God's people, you too are called to be successful. Just as the last grain slips through this hourglass, remember this: time waits for no one. Make every moment count. Don't let them slip by unnoticed. Your time is infinite. Your potential is infinite. Harness that with potential before the sand runs out. I want y'all to know, Pivot Life, stay inspired, stay motivated, and always remember, the race is on. Until our sands meet again.